Well, so Gordon gave you the message, all right. Definitely, this is the time for the NAE. It's really times of accelerating change really call for NAE to accelerate along with them. Actually, when I told Patsy that I wanted to share with you some of my thoughts about the greater implications of accelerating change, her response was to me, "What is that?" I was a little surprised by that. I recall for her the change required to accommodate the new cell phone she has and the technician services required and the various breakdowns that happen, who's going to fix them, and all the frustrations associated with it. Yeah, and then it became a little more clear. I find accelerating change to be one of those onion problems. You know, the more you peel it back, the more there is to see. It sort of goes on and on. When we think about accelerating change, technological change really is the first one that comes to mind, like cell phones. What is new, though, is the breadth of the changing areas, the speed of their global reach, and the scales of their impact. That's very different than it used to be. New technologies and capabilities are literally changing our world. The internet's, the cell phones, and the disappearance of landlines, biology-based security measures, global connectivity for all transactions, working environments without offices or even home bases, pilotless airplanes as well as cars. These changes really are coming whether we like it or not. And as for familiar alternatives disappear, many of us are left sort of hanging onto the lifeboat, sort of waiting, what's next? So I know that none of you are really surprised by any of this, by the way. It's just the seriousness is one reason why accelerating change occupies so much of our attention. So while technological changes really first grab our attention, their consequences stimulate numerous other demands for change, be they social, medical, political, educational, governmental, environmental, judicial, and others. So as individuals, each of us grapple with these changes, and we try to adapt our lives and hope we make sound decisions along the way. But what is not as evident to most of us right away is essentially the same drive that individuals experience to adapt to these change drives organizations as well. So hypothetically, when an individual may not be educated adequately for the changes required for some employment demand and requires adaptation through additional education, an organization may not meet the service charge of demand and then have to require adaptation through new systems. So we should expect that change for organizations to accelerate with demands required for adaptation, just as it does for individuals. So if we look at the recent NAE experiences, we can see the demands for change requiring adaptation all the way along, as a matter of fact. Take, for example, our 5-year strategic plan from 2016 to 2020. In 2015, the NAE actually adapted to changing demand when it created its 5-year strategic plan, setting forth a vision with 6 adaptation goals. These adaptation goals, the first one was membership representation, that is the distribution of membership by business, engineering, minority, and so forth. That was an important adaptation goal. The second was industry collaboration. Industry needed to collaborate more with industry, needed to get closer to industry. That was an adaptation goal. Public understanding of engineering, number 3. That's very important because the public doesn't have a clue about what engineering is about, as a matter of fact. Nothing. It never has, actually. And there's really no way for the public to know because they never get information about it. They don't get it from TV. They don't get it from education. There's no input for the public on what engineering actually is. Ensuring engineering talent. Oh my gosh, the world and the country are just desperate for talent. Every country, every company, every organization, every university is hungry for talent everywhere. That was number 4. Number 5, global engagement for our national purposes. that was number 5 in our strategic list. Effective advising, number 6. That's our responsibility, and what Gordon talked about a lot is more effective advising by the Academy. So each adaptation enhances the NAE's execution in its mission, as a kind of, in a world being shaped basically by continuing changes. But the mission of the NAE remains unchanged, actually. The mission was actually set out by Abraham Lincoln in 1863 for all the academies. So for instance, the NAE membership representation, just one example, in 2015 needed realignment so that it could fulfill its mission more effectively. So the membership representation adaptation aims to increase the representation of business members, of female members, of younger members, of foreign members, and underrepresented minority members. And so the demand to rebalance the membership profile drives an adaptation which is implemented through new member elections, all of you, for example. So each of the 6 goals then on the demand have a demand stimulating an adaptation that serves fulfilling the NAE mission. A second example to consider that affects NAE is the National Research Council restructuring. So the National Research Council is the studies arm of the 3 academies that you've heard, and it was encouraged, shall we say, by its sponsors for adaptation. So while the sponsors continue to appreciate the NRC consensus studies very, very much, it found the time required to produce them was too long and their cost was too high. So they stopped buying them as much. In fact, the number of consensus studies decreased about 50% over a relatively short period of time, less than 15 years. Hence, a thorough and independent review of the NRC organization was undertaken in 2017, top to bottom, and resulted in an extensive NRC restructuring plan. This NRC transformation will impact nearly every operation in the NRC, including support it provides for over 7,000 volunteers who serve it. That includes members and non-members and others. And so these are members of study committees, they are report reviewers, they are board members, they are content experts, among others. So the major organizational adaptation of the NRC is a direct result of the accelerating demands on the organization by outside of the academies. The calls for change then cascade down from organization above them too as well. So the cascade of demand to adaptation passes from and through organization to organization. A third example of this is sexual harassment issues. This third example of accelerating organizational change is the attention being given to sexual harassment and gender harassment that has been demands on organizations really throughout the world, as a matter of fact, and churches, entertainment, news, media, education, government, athletics, and so forth. So it's really quite big, as you all know, the Me Too movement. A call for adaptation has been demanding organizations take explicit actions to support victims of harassment and to control harassers. In 2018, the NRC had a study sponsored by three national academies in this complex titled Sexual Harassment of Women, Climate, Culture, and Consequences in Academic Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, which points to the seriousness of the harassment problem for the individual victims and for the professions too, including engineering. So, in fact, I encourage you to review this important report. You can get it. It's freely accessible on the Academy's website, by the way, so you can just read it off the report. And the opening summary of it provides a helpful overview of the study's findings and recommendations. A key finding, by the way, was the importance of the organizational culture that is intolerant to sexual harassment through increased transparency, proactive communication, and assertive response when harassment arises. A perception that the organization's practices on sexual harassment matter as much as its actions. If harassment is perceived to not be taken seriously, then that emboldens harassers and it intimidates victims. Victims' perception is that reporting it is basically a lose-lose experience. So based on this study, by the way, an op-ed co-authored by Sheila Widnall from MIT, from Ed Lasowska of the Academy, and myself is going to appear in publication in the IEEE Spectrum in November, if you track the IEEE Spectrum. So it's an important issue. Now, currently the NAE has no code of ethics for its members, surprisingly enough. Consequently, there's no in the NAC, there's no policy or mechanism for sanctioning or having actions on members who are not employees of the Academy itself. They're volunteers. So the NAE Council actually has initiated steps needed to establish a code of ethics for all NAE members. because the council is in the initial stages of this, nothing more to report on it, other than to note that the matter is being taken seriously and a code of ethics can be expected. And I will say that we're working closely with the other two academies as they're doing virtually the same thing. So sexual and gender harassment will fall under this kind of code of ethics when it finally gets completed. So I just want to make sure you believe, and hopefully you agree with, that the academy leadership commits this academy to ensuring a welcoming environment for all women, and in fact for everyone, as a matter of fact. Again, this is another instance, by the way, where demand leads to an organizational adaptation. Again, the same construct that comes up. Now, the fourth area of demand leading to organizational adaptation is a little brief on the capital campaign. And in fact, Gordon gave you a lot of it just a few minutes ago, so I may kind of modify my comments a bit on this. And I mentioned this last year at the annual meeting that we were going in this direction, and so this year we've come a lot further as well. As Gordon said, the U.S. government hasn't provided any base for our financial support, so we have a bit of a difficulty there. And the funding for studies really pays the costs of our work, but our studies, only some of our activities are funded and many are not. And so as the government funding for studies, by the way, is decreasing, and funding by foundations is increasing, and foundations don't cover the overhead costs, this deficit funding model is exacerbated over time, which is currently happening. So the central responsibility of the Academy, of course, is this advising mission. And so this really all hits what our fundamental reason for existing is. So we really have to figure it out. You know, engineers solve problems, and we have a problem that needs solution. So the adaptation really is to increase some private supports really that can ensure that we're able to execute our funding mission. And that'll be one of the elements of this campaign. The Council of HAC has just unanimously endorsed the announcement of this campaign at the annual meeting today. So we got their permission that we could announce this to you today. And the campaign will, as Gordon said, will conclude in December 31, 2022. And the NAE goal is actually set at $100 million. The campaign leads from NAE's strength and position. This is really very important. And it's seeking funding to support 5 strong action-oriented enablers for addressing NAE's major mission challenges. These enablers really rely on NAE's convening power, as Gordon said, its brand, its trust, its niches of strength. These are all areas of strength, established strength and established ownership of certain areas. None of these enablers will compete with universities or with industry or with government. In fact, these are things that they cannot do. So that's really important. So we're not trying to, in fact, we're trying, not to compete with universities and industry and government, because we cannot do so, as a matter of fact. We don't have the capacity to do so. We don't have the staffing to do so. We don't have the laboratories to do so. We don't have the structure that will allow us to do that. That's a failing idea for us. We need to hit the niches of great strength which they cannot do and that the nation needs done. And that's what we're doing here. So Gordon mentioned the Empower NAE initiative. That's one. That's basically the one we need to provide some base strength. And this is where the nation really depends on the expertise of the NAE members to provide advice. That's the members and the volunteers provide the advice. And then the NAE staff and infrastructure supports the studies. So that's the kind of balance we have in all of these studies. And of course, as fluctuations occur in requests for advice, especially in the government these days, as a matter of fact, the NAE study staff is really fully supported. So the members provide the credibility, all right, but the member events and elections are not funded. They're underfunded in a way. So, and where foundations intentionally decline to cover overhead costs, and the Beckman Center in California is also undercapitalized as well, and we own half of that. So we have these financial stresses. The NAE is basically always pressed to acquire real-time supports, and which it has done from its members for many years, and thank you very much, by the way. You've been extremely helpful. Without that, we would not have been able to keep the lights on. About a third of our operating budget actually comes from philanthropy. That's a lot, actually, because very few universities have that much demand on philanthropy to keep their places operating. So a vibrant NAE for advice and change is what the nation needs. And so we're setting out for an endowment, as Gordon suggested, $25 million for this particular, to secure the resources and infrastructure necessary just to operate the place. Now, the second area of focus is what we call Engineer Girl. This program is developing engineering talent, and this is a program that's been going since 2001, so about 18 years. This has developed quite substantially at this point. And by the way, engineering has a major gender problem. The nation's engineering enterprise has a major gender problem. Girls need encouragement at an early age to consider engineering and staying with engineering. Middle school seems to be a turning point. Everybody seems to agree to that, where girls who were, in fact, interested in engineering kind of turn away at about middle school age. And so since its launch in 2001, the Engineer Girl program has provided information to middle school girls and their mentors and teachers about engineering fields and careers through its website. It receives 50 to 70,000 hits monthly on this website. So it gets a lot of traffic. Now, the Society of Women Engineers actually partners with the NAE when they dropped their own program because they found that our program was better than theirs. And they're now working with girls through the Engineer Girl program. They essentially provide counsel to girls. They have back and forth interchanges with them. They have a meeting. They have an Engineer Girl meeting at their national meeting where they can train up some ambassador program girls in there. So the SWE is very, very supportive and enthusiastic about working with this. Now, just for a little bit of background data, so if you think there's a problem or not, women constitute 60% of the undergraduate students, university students in the United States, but only about 20% of engineering undergraduate students are women. So we don't get a large slice of them. 48% of the U.S. workforce is female. Only 14% of the workforce is engineering. So our society really can ill afford to lose this important talent base in its engineering workforce, and therefore it needs to reach out to this very important segment of the population. It's a major source of talent and creativity and advice for solving societal problems that will continue to be squandered if we don't do it. So this is a problem that needs serious NAE attention. I mean, engineer solves problems, and you have to say this is a big problem. So this creative effort with Engineer Girl as part of this campaign plays a dramatic role in trying to really attack this problem directly. The third part of this campaign is the Grand Challenge Scholarship Program that Gordon mentioned I'm very interested in, to say the least. And it's another talent development program. So in the 21st century, the engineering workforce must be prepared for the special demands and the global engineering practice to be employable and successful. I mean, already industry is in critical need of engineers who are educated to be global engineers and need only to increase. They have a mindset to work in these other cultures and other circumstances. And that doesn't happen, it hasn't happened in the past because it was never necessary, but it's really necessary now. So the Grand Challenge Scholarship Program is really a supplement to any engineering education curriculum that prepares students to engage in grand challenges or globally socially conscious engineering initiatives. And it's easily adaptable by all universities, unconditionally and everywhere. It's unique in this regard. It's the only program like that I think has ever existed. More than 100 U.S. universities have already signed on, when there isn't a nickel of money in this for them, by the way. And 35 international universities have signed on as well, and no money in them for either. So this is driven only by the idea. They've not been bought up in some way. So the initial goal for this is 200 U.S. universities and 200 international universities, and the long-term goal is much greater because our engineering enterprise is growing all the time internationally, and therefore needs to reach more countries. So more than half, by the way, of the Grand Challenge Scholars Program graduates are females. while only 20% of the U.S. undergraduate students in engineering are females. So it draws those females mainly because I believe it's a socially conscious program, and therefore those are very attractive to female students right away. I always say boys like to blow things up, and females like to help people in society. That's kind of seems to be the kind of rough breakdown. So it changes the way engineers think about engineering profession and their role in society. It's kind of a mindset change, which is really, I believe, important for engineering today. So we want to bring the program to scale both nationally and globally, and potentially revolutionize engineering generally, because I think it has a feature to this which all engineering everywhere actually needs. So its power is in its idea, which is the only driver of it, as a matter of fact, which is also very attractive to me. So we're going to advance this program as much as we can, and there's a significant endowment and piece for that program as well. The fourth area of our five is Frontiers of Engineering. This is over a 20-year program that has been remarkably successful. It's the profession's premier networking opportunity for engineering leaders of tomorrow. It's proven itself to be so. It provides outstanding early career engineers with a sense of community and pride in the kind of creative accomplishments of their fellow engineers and people like themselves. The attendees are about age 40 plus or minus, and they are equally divided between academia and industry, and about 10% from government labs as well. So it's very well balanced, a very strong representation of women and minorities, of course, in this program. And at these gatherings, they explore collaborations with each other, they form professional, often lifelong partnerships and relationships, they transfer new techniques across fields, and they develop a renewed appreciation for the breadth and power of the engineering enterprise. The national and international Frontiers programs we have annually, they're basically on 5 international ones on a rotating basis, one with Japan, one with China, one with Germany, one with India, and one with the European Union. They convene hundreds of select young engineers and in these current and emerging topic fields, just where we need them, and where they are inspired to build their professional network. Now, while election to the membership of the Academy is highly selective, I'm sure everybody here will agree without argument, and it usually occurs many years after the Frontiers of Engineering experience. In 2017, 20% of all the new NAE members who were elected were alumni of the Frontiers of Engineering program, 20%. So this demonstrates the program's remarkable success to identify and develop new leaders. And this constantly advancing foundation of engineering is a kind of continuing need to develop new and young engineering leaders that come out of a program like this. There'll always be a place for this program. This is a program that will never grow old, because all the elements of it are constantly renewing themselves every year. So the Frontiers program also looks for an endowment piece that it can continue and expand its successful role in developing and engaging young engineering leaders. And finally, the Center for Engineering Ethics and Society is the fifth one. Engineering and technology, of course, create jobs and wealth, and they serve people in society. But it's really critical that all of these occur and are done ethically. Ethical challenges will increase as engineers tackle international and socially complex problems. Ethical practice is necessary to ensure the integrity of engineering and public trust in engineers and engineering. So the Center for Engineering Ethics and Society that we're talking about and its online ethics center provide a wealth of information and resources on ethical issues in engineering and technology for engineers and educators and students. Interesting, I think, for you is in 2010, the Library of Congress selected the Online Ethics Center website for archiving in its historic collections of internet materials on engineering ethics, thereby making them available to all people globally through the library's public website. This is a very special position. So in 2017, the CE's website provided more than 480,000 page views to over 150,000 users from more than 25 different countries. So you can see that this is a very well-established program that really can merit some expansions and better utility that we, with supports, we can make happen. So the CES is the fifth program in this. So finally, the NAE really rests on its Academy's platform of unparalleled convening power, reputation, national standing, trust, and the trust of the engineering community and its findings in council. None of the campaign goals, as I said, can be undertaken by universities and government, which really ensures that they're not going to be conflicted in some way with what others are doing. The concentration on needs cuts really across all engineering enterprises as well. So as a final note, this campaign is NAE's adaptation by raising private support necessary to fulfill its demands on its advisory role. It's a lot of money. Yes, it is indeed. But our mission is sending us to the future, not to the past. So our responsibility here is to stand up for the documented needs for established, successful, and expandable programs enhancing our mission into the future. And if we don't stand up for them, who will? So in times of accelerating change, we should expect the change cascades through people and organizations in a similar manner. The demands of an organization affects its owners, supporters, structures, employees, and so forth, who also have to adapt. So for organizations or individuals, few are free of this demand adaptation cascade, for it is created by essentially the attractive advances accelerating around us, and by consequences need to adapt to them. I'm confident that the NAE leadership will effectively guide the Academy in its adaptations, especially through the thoughtful engagement and generous support of our members and others as we address them and embrace our new opportunities going forward. Thank you for your attention and your most generous support. Thank you.